Hi, welcome to our analysis of slot 2 of CAT 2019. So, how was CAT 2019 compared to both CAT 2018 as well as slot 1, that is the morning slot of this test? Firstly, when we compare it with the morning slot, which is what most students will be interested in because of the normalization, both slots were more or less similar in difficulty level with marginal differences in each section. Compared to last year, there were significant differences with respect to each section. So when we look at slot 2 first, we observe that the verbal ability section of both slots today was significantly tougher compared to CAT 2018. The overall structure remained constant, that is 4 passages having 5 questions and 1 passage having 4 questions. However, in both slots we observed that the passages had at least one RC which was on the tough side with dense material to read, and the rest of the passages were slightly simpler. However, the questions were all inferential in nature, along with the options being very close to each other. So this made option elimination very tricky, and hence you had to be very careful while selecting the right answer for these questions. Moving to the other part of slot 2, which was the non-RC questions, what we observed was that the non-RC part of slot 2 was significantly tougher compared to the RC section or the RC part. The para summaries, which were MCQs and hence had negative marking, were all on the tougher side with at least one question definitely being very tough. Similarly, the para jumbles had one tough question, a couple of moderate questions and one easy question. So question selection was important. Again, in terms of the odd man out questions, we had one tough question and a couple of moderate questions. So on the whole, if we were to consider this section, we could say that it was definitely a moderate to tough section, and hence you had to select the absolute right questions in order to clear the cutoff. Anywhere around say 25 attempts and a score in the 60s, the low 60s would be good enough to get a 99 odd percentile. This seems to be the preliminary analysis. Let's move on to the second section, which is DILR. As always, it was on the tougher side. However, it wasn't a nightmare that we came to associate with CAT 2015 or 16. A unique feature of the DILR section in the second slot was that it had 3 to 4 very easy sets and 3 to 4 tough sets. So the paper was very neatly divided into 2 parts and you had to select the 4 correct sets to be attempted. Now, 2 of these sets were very typical NMAT type sets, one of which was a scatter plot on rainfall and one was a spider chart on profit and loss. Both these were sitters and definitely should have been done. Similarly, there was one set which was on Venn diagrams but which had 2 aspects to a Venn diagram. So, number of people who voted for a person and then some other aspect. So, this looked difficult but definitely could have been done. I would say that these 3 were the sets that you should have definitely attempted in this mock. Apart from these 3, there were 2 other sets that were deceptive but doable. One of them was on students and the languages spoken by them. I am pretty sure most students would have tried it. However, it was not a standard matrix based set. It involved a lot of conditionalities and grouping, etc. So it was quite tricky. But if you persevered with it, you could have completed it. Similarly, there was one which looked like a figure which had 9 pouches or 3 pouches per column or per row, and you had to find the number of coins in each. This was lengthy and tricky, but again with perseverance you could have solved it. So on the whole, you could have solved anywhere around 4.5 to 5 sets in this particular section, which made it slightly easier compared to last year, but more or less at par with the morning slot. 3 sets here, the one on a tournament, the one on setting papers and the schedule of doctors were on the tougher side. So these might have been skipped. On the whole, 18 to 19 attempts and a score close to 49-50 would be very good considering a 99 percentile. Lastly, moving on to the quant section. Compared to 2018, the quant this year has been reported to be slightly easier. At the same time, this section had a combination of some very easy questions and some very difficult questions. So we could say that there were anywhere around 11 12 sitters and easy questions which had to be selected with care. And a student could have attempted anywhere around 22 23 questions or somewhere around 22 questions if he chose the right questions to solve. Arithmetic was the dominant section for this mock with around 13 questions in arithmetic, followed by algebra and numbers, then modern math and geometry as usual. The arithmetic questions, as expected, were the easiest. While the morning slot did not have any questions on log, the second slot had a few questions, precisely 3, but they were combined with concepts of quadratic equations. So that was a combination of the two. In general, also in terms of the numerical entry questions, there were 11 to 12 questions and the rest being the standard MCQs. So in general, if we see, this was more or less a standard QA section requiring a lot of question selection. On the whole, 22 good attempts and a score of around 59 to 60 would be sufficient for a 99 percentile. If we were to analyze the entire slot 2, we can say that a score in the low 160s, and this we are talking of a raw score. So a 160, 165 going up to 166 would be definitely ensuring a 99 percentile for you. Thank you, and we'll be coming up with a more detailed analysis of both slots and putting it up tomorrow. Wish you all the very best for your further exams.